She just wanted to honor her mother's last wish, but the wealthy family she worked for had other plans. What happened next would change not just her life, but the lives of countless others forever. The world was still dark when Elena Rivera opened her eyes, her body already knowing the time before she even glanced at the clock. 4:30 a.m. The familiar ache in her shoulders greeted her as she rose silently from the narrow bed in her quarters at the back of the Blackwood estate. For 11 years she had awakened at this exact moment, her internal clock more reliable than any alarm. 11 years of polishing silver that wasn't hers, of scrubbing floors she would never own, of raising children who barely knew her name. The Blackwood mansion stood like a fortress on the edge of the city. 3 stories of pristine white stone and gleaming windows that overlooked manicured gardens. Inside, every surface shimmered with wealth: crystal chandeliers, marble countertops, artwork worth more than Elena would earn in a lifetime. She moved through this opulence like a ghost, trained to be present without being seen, to serve without being acknowledged. In the pre-dawn quiet, Elena went through her morning ritual. She tied back her dark hair, smoothed her uniform, and silently made her way to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Her movements were economical, practiced: coffee brewing, fresh fruit being sliced, bread toasting. She set the table with the fine china, each placement perfect, each glass spotless. Mrs. Blackwood would accept nothing less. The first rays of sunlight were just beginning to filter through the tall windows when Elena heard the soft buzz of her phone. She froze, momentarily confused. No one called her this early. The kitchen staff wouldn't arrive for another hour, and the Blackwoods never contacted her directly unless something was wrong. She pulled the phone from her pocket and saw her sister Lucia's name on the screen. Her heart constricted. Lucia never called, not at this hour. With trembling fingers, Elena pressed the phone to her ear. "Elena," Lucia's voice was thin, strained. "It's Mama. She's gone." The world tilted. Elena gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. Her breath caught in her throat. "Gone." The word echoed in her mind, hollow and final. "When?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Last night, in her sleep." Lucia's words were clipped, practical through her grief. "The funeral is in 3 days. You need to come home." Home. The concept seemed foreign after so many years away. Elena had left their small coastal town 11 years ago, promising to send money, promising to visit. But the visits had become rare, the calls shorter. Mrs. Blackwood had a way of making time off feel like an indulgence Elena hadn't earned. "I'll be there," Elena said, determination solidifying through her shock. "I'll leave today." After ending the call, Elena stood motionless in the kitchen, her mind racing. Her mother, who had raised 3 children alone after their father's death, who had worked cleaning houses until her hands were raw, who had insisted Elena pursue a better life, was gone. And Elena hadn't been there. The sound of footsteps on the stairs jerked her back to the present. Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway. Impeccably dressed in a silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Her keen blue eyes took in the tableau, the half-prepared breakfast, Elena's tear-streaked face, the phone still clutched in her hand. "Is something wrong?" Her voice wasn't unkind, merely curious, detached. Elena straightened her shoulders. "My mother passed away last night, Mrs. Blackwood. I need to take some time off for her funeral. It's in 3 days." Mrs. Blackwood's expression shifted, a momentary flicker of sympathy crossing her features before practical considerations took over. "I'm sorry for your loss, Elena, but this is quite inconvenient timing. The charity gala is this weekend, and we've got 20 guests arriving on Friday." Elena stared at her employer, momentarily speechless. Her mother was dead, and Mrs. Blackwood was concerned about a party. "It's my mother's funeral," Elena repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need to be there." Blackwood sighed, glancing at her watch. "Let me discuss this with Theodore. We might be able to arrange something, though it will be difficult to find a replacement on such short notice." She turned to leave, then added, almost as an afterthought, "The children will be down shortly. Make sure their breakfast is ready." And just like that, Elena was dismissed. Her grief was an inconvenience, a scheduling problem to be solved. She mechanically returned to preparing breakfast, her movements now stiff, her mind elsewhere. She thought of her mother's hands, always busy, always gentle. She thought of her last visit home, over a year ago, when her mother had seemed smaller somehow, frailer, but still insistent that Elena was doing the right thing, making a good life. "You send that money for Lucia's children's education," her mother had said. "Don't worry about me. I'm proud of you, Mija." Now she was gone, and Elena had been polishing someone else's silver when it happened. The Blackwood children came down for breakfast, two teenagers who barely looked up from their phones, muttering thanks only when prompted by habit. They had been young when Elena first came to work for the family. She had changed their diapers, soothed their fevers, taught them Spanish lullabies. Now they looked past her, through her, their gratitude perfunctory when it existed at all. By mid-morning, the house was buzzing with activity. The chef had arrived to begin preparations for dinner. The gardeners were outside trimming hedges. The housekeeping staff was preparing the guest rooms, and Elena was still waiting for an answer about her mother's funeral. It came after lunch. Mrs. Blackwood found her in the laundry room, where she was ironing Mr. Blackwood's shirts. "Elena, I've spoken with Theodore. We simply cannot spare you for 3 days right now, not with the gala approaching. Perhaps you could go for 1 day, the day of the funeral, and return immediately after? We would deduct the travel costs from your salary, of course." Elena's hand stilled on the iron. 1 day. They were offering her 1 day to say goodbye to her mother, to comfort her sister, to mourn with her family. 1 day, with the cost of the plane ticket deducted from her already modest pay. "My mother's final wish was for her children to carry her casket together," Elena said quietly. "The vigil begins tomorrow night. The burial is the day after. I need to be there for all of it." Mrs. Blackwood's lips thinned. "I understand this is difficult, but we all have obligations, Elena. The work you do here sustains your family. Surely your mother would have understood that." The iron in Elena's hand suddenly felt too heavy. She set it down carefully, aware of the tremble in her fingers. For 11 years she had bitten her tongue, swallowed her pride, accepted the small indignities that came with her position. She had missed birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, all because the Blackwoods needed her, because the money she sent home mattered more than her presence. But not this. She would not miss her mother's funeral. "I need to go home," Elena said, looking directly into Mrs. Blackwood's eyes. "I need to bury my mother." "If you insist on leaving at such a critical time, Elena, I'm afraid we'll have to reconsider your position here. Good help is hard to find, but not irreplaceable." The threat hung in the air between them, clear and cold. Elena felt something shift inside her, a crack forming in the foundation of fear and obligation that had held her in place for so long. "Then I quit," she said, the words emerging before she fully realized her decision. "I quit." Mrs. Blackwood blinked, genuine surprise crossing her features. In 11 years, Elena had never defied her, never raised her voice, never put her own needs first. "Don't be hasty, Elena. Think about what you're giving up: steady employment, housing, benefits. Where will you go? What will you do?" "I'm going home," Elena thought. "I'm going to bury my mother. I'm going to remember who I am." But she said none of this aloud. Instead, she untied her apron and folded it carefully, placing it on top of the freshly ironed shirts. "I'll pack my things and be gone by evening. Please have my final pay ready." She left Mrs. Blackwood standing in the laundry room, mouth slightly open, for once at a loss for words. In her small room at the back of the house, Elena packed quickly. She had few possessions: some clothes, a few books, photographs of her family. 11 years in this house, and she could fit her life into a single suitcase. The realization was both freeing and devastating. As she zipped her bag closed, she heard a knock at the door. It was Mr. Blackwood, tall and imposing in his tailored suit, his expression carefully neutral. "Elena, Catherine tells me you're leaving us." "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. My mother has died and I need to go home for her funeral." He nodded slowly. "I understand family obligations. Truly, I do. But I'm concerned that you're making an emotional decision that you might regret. The charity gala this weekend is crucial for my political campaign. Having the house in perfect order, the meal flawlessly executed. These details matter." Elena looked at the man she had served for over a decade. She had pressed his shirts, polished his shoes, prepared his favorite meals. She had listened to him practice political speeches about family values and hard work. all while she missed another Christmas with her own family. "My mother is dead, Mr. Blackwood," she said quietly. "She worked her entire life cleaning other people's houses so that her children could have opportunities. Her one request was that we all be there to carry her to her rest. I won't dishonor that for a party." His expression hardened. "I see. Well, if that's your decision, I won't try to change your mind. Catherine has your final pay envelope. We'll need your room cleared by tonight." He turned to leave, then paused. "It's a shame, Elena. You've been reliable all these years. I thought you understood your place here." "My place." The words echoed in her mind as he left. Yes, she had understood her place. Silent, invisible, grateful. But no more. An hour later, Elena stood at the service entrance of the Blackwood estate, suitcase in hand. The afternoon sun was warm on her face as she walked down the long driveway toward the gate. She didn't look back at the gleaming white house, the manicured lawns, the life she was leaving behind. Instead, she looked ahead, toward the city sprawling below, toward the airport that would take her home. For the first time in 11 years, Elena Rivera was making a choice for herself. And despite the uncertainty before her, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of her mind, she felt something unexpected blooming in her chest. Freedom. The small coastal town where Elena had grown up looked both familiar and strange as the taxi wound through its streets. The colorful buildings seemed faded, smaller than she remembered. The church tower still dominated the central square, and children still played soccer in the dusty plaza. But there were new shops, new faces, 11 years of changes she had missed. When the taxi stopped in front of her childhood home, a modest blue house with peeling paint and a small garden of stubborn flowers, Elena felt her chest tighten. The last time she had stood here, her mother had waved from the doorway, promising that she was fine, that Elena shouldn't worry. The front door opened before she reached it. Lucia stood there, dark circles under her eyes, her face a mirror of Elena's grief. Without a word, the sisters fell into each other's arms, holding tight as if to keep each other from drowning. "You're here," Lucia whispered. "You actually came." "Of course I came," Elena said, pulling back to look at her sister's face. "How could I not?" Inside, the house was full of people, family, neighbors, friends. They moved around quietly, bringing food, arranging flowers, speaking in hushed tones. In the main room, her mother's casket was open, surrounded by candles and photographs. Elena approached slowly, her legs suddenly unsteady. Maria Josefina Rivera looked peaceful, her hands folded over her chest, her favorite rosary twined between her fingers. Elena reached out to touch her mother's face, the skin cool and waxy beneath her fingertips. "I'm here, Mama," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took so long." That night, as the town slept, Elena sat vigil beside her mother's casket. The house was quiet now, the visitors gone until morning. Only family remained, Lucia and her children, their brother Miguel and his wife, a few aunts and uncles dozing in chairs. Lucia brought her a cup of coffee and sat beside her. "I wasn't sure you'd be able to come," she admitted. "I know how strict your employers are." Elena stared into her coffee. "I quit?" Lucia's eyes widened. "You what?" "Elena, that job, the money you send." "I couldn't miss this," Elena said simply. "Mama deserved better than that." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Elena's decision settling between them. "What will you do now?" Lucia finally asked. Elena had been asking herself the same question since she walked out of the Blackwood estate. 11 years of her life dedicated to one family, one job. What skills did she have? Where would she go? "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'll figure it out. For now, I'm just here, with Mama, with you." Lucia took her hand, squeezing it tightly. Maybe you could stay. There's room here. Your nephew Antonio barely knows you. The little ones have only seen you in video calls. Stay." The possibility unfolded before her, both terrifying and enticing. No more silent mornings in someone else's kitchen, no more being invisible, no more missing the moments that mattered. Before she could respond, Miguel joined them, his face drawn with fatigue and sorrow. He handed Elena a small wooden box. "Mama wanted you to have this. She made me promise to give it to you when you came for the funeral." Elena opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a journal, its cover worn and soft with age. She recognized it immediately. Her mother's recipe book, where she had recorded not only dishes but memories, Small notes about family gatherings, margin drawings by her children. "Look inside," Miguel urged. Elena opened the journal and gasped. Tucked between the pages were stacks of bills, pesos carefully arranged and secured with a paperclip. A note in her mother's handwriting read, "For Elena, when she is ready to come home." Tears blurred her vision as she realized what this meant. All those years of sending money home, believing she was supporting her mother, and here was proof that Maria Rivera had been saving that money. Not spending it on herself, not even using it for necessities, but saving it for Elena's return. "She knew," Lucia said softly. "She knew someday you'd want to come back, but that you'd worry about money. She was making sure you could." Elena clutched the journal to her chest, her mother's last gift, not just the money but permission to come home, to start again. The funeral the next day was a blur of tears and embraces. Elena, Lucia, Miguel, and their cousins carried Maria's casket from the church to the cemetery, honoring her final wish. The weight of the wooden box pressed into Elena's shoulder, a physical manifestation of her grief, her love, her regret. As they lowered her mother into the earth, Elena made a silent promise. No more living half a life. No more sacrificing her dignity, her voice, her presence in the world. Maria Rivera had worked her fingers to the bone to give her children choices. It was time Elena honored that sacrifice by choosing herself. After the burial, as family and friends gathered at the house for the final prayers, Elena's niece Gabriela approached her. At 17, she was a serious girl, studious and observant, so like Elena at that age that it made her heart ache. "Tia Elena," she said, her voice tentative, "could I ask you something?" "Of course, cariño." Gabriela hesitated, then plunged ahead. "What was it like, working for those rich Americans? Was it worth it?" The question struck Elena like a physical blow. Was it worth it? Worth the missed birthdays, the lonely nights, the indignities large and small? Worth not being there when her mother drew her last breath? She could lie, tell her niece what she had been telling herself for years, that the sacrifice was necessary, that the money made it worthwhile, that serving the Blackwoods had been a privilege rather than a slow erosion of her spirit. But looking into Gabriela's eyes, so earnest and trusting, Elena found she couldn't perpetuate the myth. "No," she said quietly. "No, it wasn't worth it. I thought I was helping our family by sending money, by being far away, but I missed so much. I let myself become invisible. Less than I am." Gabriela's brow furrowed. "But you did help us. The money you sent paid for my school, for Tio Miguel's operation." "Yes," Elena acknowledged, "but I could have found another way. One that didn't require me to be treated like I wasn't fully human. One that didn't separate me from the people I love." She took her niece's hands in hers. "Remember this, Gabriela. Your work matters, but how people treat you while you do that work matters just as much. Never let anyone make you feel small." That night, after the house had emptied of visitors, Elena sat on the front steps with Lucia and Miguel, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The grief was still there, a hollow ache in her chest, but alongside it was something else, a sense of possibility. "I think I'm going to stay," she said finally. "Not forever, maybe, but for now." Lucia leaned her head on Elena's shoulder. "Good, we've missed you. What will you do?" Miguel asked. Elena thought about the question. In the Blackwood house, her days had been scheduled down to the minute, her tasks predetermined, her value measured in clean floors and pressed shirts. The expanse of unplanned time before her was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I've been thinking about Mama's recipe book," she said slowly. "All those dishes she used to make, the ones we grew up with. The Blackwoods had a chef, but sometimes Mrs. Heth Blackwood would have me prepare traditional dishes for their dinner parties, authentic cuisine for their guests to sample." She paused, remembering how Mrs. Blackwood would proudly introduce these dishes as family recipes, never mentioning that it was Elena who had prepared them, Elena whose family had passed down these traditions. "There's that empty storefront near the plaza," she continued, "the one that used to be a bakery. What if I opened a small café there? Nothing fancy, just good food. Mama's recipes." Miguel and Lucia exchanged a glance, then smiled. "Mama would have loved that," Miguel said. In the weeks that followed, Elena's vision began to take shape. The storefront near the plaza was affordable, especially with her mother's savings and her final pay from the Blackwoods. Local carpenters, friends of Miguel, helped build simple tables and benches. Elena painted the walls herself, a warm yellow that reminded her of mornings in her mother's kitchen. She named the café Maria's and opened with a small menu of her mother's specialties: slow-cooked beans, fresh tortillas, rice pudding with cinnamon. On the first day, curious neighbors filled the tables, drawn by the scent of cooking and the novelty of something new in their small town. By the end of the week, word had spread. Tourists visiting the nearby beaches began to stop in, enchanted by the authentic food and Elena's warm hospitality. Before long, Maria's had become not just a cafe but a gathering place, where stories were shared over steaming plates of food, where laughter echoed off the yellow walls. Elena hired 2 young women from the town to help in the kitchen, teaching them her mother's recipes with the same patience Maria had once shown her. In the evenings, she sat with her family, Lucia and her children, Miguel and his wife, eating together, present in a way she hadn't been for years. 6 months after opening Maria's, Elena received a package from the United States. Inside was a magazine, a glossy publication focused on travel and food, open to a feature about hidden culinary gems in coastal towns. There was Maria's, photographed in warm morning light, described as authentically local, unforgettably delicious. The article mentioned Elena by name, calling her cooking a love letter to traditional flavors and praising the warmth of her hospitality. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note: "Thought you should see this. Your cafe sounds wonderful. We miss your cooking. Amelia Blackwood." Amelia, the Blackwoods' teenage daughter who had barely looked up from her phone at breakfast. Elena stared at the note, stunned that the girl had even noticed her absence, let alone sought out information about her new life. That evening, as she closed up the cafe, Elena found herself thinking about the Blackwoods for the first time in months. Were they well? Had the charity gala been a success? Who prepared their breakfast now? But these thoughts no longer carried the weight of obligation, the tug of regret. They were simply passing curiosities about people who had once been part of her life, but no longer defined it. As she locked the door of Maria's, a young American couple approached, the magazine in hand. "Are you Elena?" the woman asked eagerly. "We read about your cafe and came specially to try your food. We're visiting from Boston." Elena smiled. "Yes, I'm Elena. I'm sorry, but we're closed for the night." The couple looked so disappointed that Elena found herself adding, "But if you'd like to come back for breakfast tomorrow, I'll make you something special, not on the menu." Their faces lit up. "We'd love that, thank you." As they walked away, chatting excitedly, Elena felt a profound sense of satisfaction. These strangers had sought her out, valued her skill, treated her with respect, not as a nameless servant, but as a creator, an artist, a person with something unique to offer the world. She walked home through the familiar streets, greeting neighbors by name, stopping to admire the sunset over the ocean. The grief of her mother's loss was still there, a quiet companion, but alongside it, now, was gratitude. Gratitude for Maria's final gift, not just the money, but the push Elena had needed to reclaim her life, to remember her worth. At home, she found Gabriella at the kitchen table, textbooks spread before her, studying by lamplight. The girl looked up as Elena entered. "Tia Elena, can I ask your advice? I've been offered a scholarship to study in Mexico City. It's a good opportunity, but I'd be far from home, from the family." Elena sat across from her niece, thinking carefully before she answered. She thought of her own journey, the opportunities and costs of leaving, the unexpected path that had led her back. "Distance doesn't have to mean disappearing," she said finally. "I made that mistake. I thought sending money home was enough, that my absence was justified by what the job provided. But there are always choices, Gabriella. You can pursue your dreams without becoming invisible. You can succeed without sacrificing your dignity." She reached across the table and took her niece's hand. "If this scholarship is what you want, then go. Learn everything you can. But remember to come home, not just physically, but in your heart. Remember who you are and where you come from. And never, never let anyone make you feel small." Gabriella nodded, squeezing her aunt's hand. "Like you with your cafe. You're doing what you love, but you're here with us too." "Exactly." Elena smiled. It took me a long time to understand that it doesn't have to be either or. That I don't have to choose between providing for my family and being present for them. Between work that sustains me financially and work that sustains my spirit. Later that night, as Elena prepared for bed, she found herself standing before the small altar in her room where her mother's photograph sat surrounded by candles and fresh flowers. Maria looked out from the frame, her eyes kind, her smile knowing. "You were right, Mama," Elena whispered. "I found my way home." Outside her window, the town slept peacefully. In a few hours, Elena would rise and open her café, welcoming neighbors and travelers alike with food made from recipes passed down through generations. She would work hard, but on her own terms. She would earn her living, but never at the cost of her soul. The night was quiet, the stars bright over the sleeping town. Elena Rivera, no longer invisible, no longer silent, closed her eyes and dreamed of tomorrow. If this story moved you, take a moment to consider those who remain unseen in your daily life. The people who serve your food, clean your spaces, care for your children. Each has a story, a family, dreams beyond the work they do for others. Subscribe to receive more stories that illuminate these hidden lives. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not defined by their work, but by their humanity. And remember, in a world that too often tells us to stay small, the most powerful act of courage is to reclaim our own voice, our own worth, our own story. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below.